A reminder again for lightning talks, if you missed our lightning talks earlier today, know that lightning talks are 5 minutes each, 5 minutes exactly. We will interrupt our speakers if we have to keep the time, and they'll get some time warnings up on the screen. And our lightning talks are always the most popular thing of the summit, so I'm happy to hear from these last few. So first up, I see that they are there and ready to go, is Donna Harrell, Director of Communications and Marketing at Lines for Life in Oregon, and John Schrag, who's the Executive Director of Pamplin Media Group. So Donna, John? All right, and now your 5-minute clock is starting.
All right, I'm gonna get to the top. Here we go. All right, first of all, thanks for having us here. We have, I think, a good story to tell. I'm John Schrag. I'm executive editor of the Pamplin Media Group, as I said, in Oregon. And this story really started in the fall of 2018 when Lines for Life, which is a very respected suicide prevention organization, hosted a half-day training on how we could do a better job of reporting on suicide. And the topic had generated a lot of debate in newsrooms where I worked, so I showed up, and I was really glad I did because Lines for Life had a lot to say. Donna, tell us about it.
Yeah, Lines for Life is a regional nonprofit that has a national footprint, and we are dedicated to preventing substance abuse and suicide. And our work really addresses 3 different areas, including intervention, prevention, and advocacy.
Yeah, and one of the ways they advocate is to help us journalists do a better job. And at this conference, we learned that we had very different ways of covering suicide, and some of us didn't cover suicide at all, which we learned was a mistake. So we learned a lot of lessons, but at one point, what we really realized is that what we needed to do was to tell the story and to tell it collectively. And so Oregon's first statewide collaboration was started. An early email thread grew into a small working group. We met at Oregon Public Broadcasting. About 24 newsrooms were represented. We came to some common agreements that first we would all publish and broadcast our stories during the same week in April 2019, that all our content could be posted and shared on a common website, that we'd promote each other's work. And then also, while this was a journalist-driven collaboration, we knew we needed some help because this topic was both sensitive and unfamiliar to us. And that's where Lines for Life again came in.
Yes, I lost my place, John.
So what Lines for Life did is they provided a common data set.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. My fault. Lines for Life got the message first and foremost that journalists would control what was produced and how journalists like to work. We all know that, but we were able to provide support in 3 key areas. We provided a consistent data report so that everyone was reporting the same numbers. We created a responsible reporting guideline document that really tended to lean toward the right language to use, not to cause trauma or contagion. And the third thing we did was we branded, provided branding elements to really key in breaking the silence and the fact that we're trying to help Oregon. So those are some of the things that we were able to do. 40 newsrooms and over 100 stories were produced. And this was the first time we've had this type of participation from all our media groups across Portland. We actually had a lot of research, and we spent some time looking at the data, and we were able to show that Oregon's suicide rates have been higher than the national average for the past 3 decades. So that was another eye-opening piece of information that journalists really keyed in on as far as trying to make sure that they were part of this. We had participation from major news outlets like the Oregonian. We had the largest broadcast outlets, and we were even able to get a local pollster to donate his services and conduct statewide surveys on people's attitudes and experience with suicide.
So the statewide focus really got people's attention, and it came at a great time because the Oregon legislature was meeting and they were taking up some legislation to address the issue of mental health in public schools, and specifically a law addressing teen suicide. And we had quite an impact, Donna.
Yeah, we were able we weren't able to really quantify the collective research of the journalism, but we do know that during that focused week in April, our shared Twitter hashtag had over 1.4 million impressions. And that is not bad with a state that just has 4 million residents.
So for this group, I would say as a collaboration, it was a big success in almost every way. We worked well together. We did some really impactful journalism, but of course it was a collaboration, so we had problems. First, there was no project manager, and those of you watching this will know that that was a recipe for at least frustration, and we had it in droves. We also had some gaps in our reporting. We didn't deeply explore the high rate of suicide among veterans in Oregon. We could have done more on guns, though OPB did some good reporting on there. But the most troubling omission that we saw, and we're dealing with even now, is that our reporting had little to do with or about the communities of color in Oregon. So as we look forward to the next step, we look to other organizations like People Magazine and say, hey, our reporting the next time has to reflect the diversity of the people impacted by this. And that's again where we're going to look to our colleagues at Lines for Life to give us support to this journalistic process.
Yeah, the next step for breaking the silence on our end is to really expand our reach to communities often left out of the conversation. So the hardest part of this for journalists is understanding that it takes time to build trust in these communities. So you have to put in the time. If you want a story in September for Suicide Awareness Month, you've got to start now. Go to your community centers, your youth programs, your churches, and be present. These communities, these marginalized communities want to tell their story. They don't want us to make them up. So just go in there and learn, respect, and acknowledge the trauma and disparities experienced by minority groups when it comes to minorities. And you will see that the data is showing that the fastest growing suicide percentages are in Black males, ages 13 to 26. In addition, we have plans to expand our reach. So before COVID, we were conducting meetings in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, because we want to make this a nationwide collaboration. So our goal is to have every state realize that silence around suicide is not working. It's time to break that silence on suicide nationwide. And if you want to learn more, you can go, we have a website, BTS, visit breakingthesilenceor.com, and you can see some of the stories and some of the videos that really, we did a great job with and actually got nominated for quite a few awards for the writing that we did during that week.
If you want to know more about our efforts to expand this in your region, at this point, I'm the point person. My email address is on the first slide. You can also get it from Stefanie. We can put you in touch with people in your areas who are interested in doing this because we're looking for next year.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Donna. You can finish your point.
I just wanted to make sure I do a lot of work for Lines for Life from a diversity perspective. We have a lot of different communities that we're working with. So if anybody wants to know how to do that, I do presentations on that as well. And if you want to reach out, I can send you over some documents.
Yeah, do you mind if we drop your email right now in the chat?
Go ahead. I would love it because
cool.
I get questions.
Yeah.
So people go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
I just want to make sure that everyone knows that it doesn't matter what color you are or whatever. It just matters that you go and that you're committed and that you can build that trust. And I will tell you that you will learn more than you will ever expect to learn, and it will really open your mind. And without that voice, those multiple voices, this is not going to be what we want it to be. If you think about the reach of Chicago, LA, New York, we have to have that piece.
Absolutely. And we will share all of the attendees' email addresses. Everyone who indicated yes, I forgot to mention that earlier, that we're going to share everyone's email address who said during registration yes, and that will go out probably later today. There was no way I was going to interrupt you, Donna, at the end there, because the point that you were making is so important. And John, I also just want to say thank you for acknowledging that the collaboration during the first part lacked diversity and lacked some of that engagement with the communities. And I'm really thankful that Donna, your offer of working with others who might be facing similar issues in their collaborations, which are a lot of people. So thank you for that. So next up is Larry Rosenthal of the Associated Press. So you see Larry, turn your video on, unmute yourself. There you are.
Hey,
we can hear you. All right, let me get your timer out.
there we go. Let me get my ready
Share
here.
your screen.
I have some text here. That's not showing right. I'm not sharing that. So I'm just going to read from that.
Sounds good. Go ahead.
Thank you for letting me join this panel. I'm here to talk about AP StoryShare. What is AP StoryShare? It's entirely separate from what people know as the AP Wire. It's a password-protected website that lets news organizations share content in any and all formats. And it was developed with support from the Google News Initiative. We launched our first pilot in New York in January. We added Oregon and Colorado a month ago. Currently, we have about 60 news organizations across those 3 states taking part. So why are we doing this? Of course, AP is a pioneer in news sharing. We've been doing it for over 150 years. What we've seen over recent years, not news to anyone at this summit, is that a growing number of news organizations are creating their own types of sharing networks. What we thought was that we could leverage the power of our news cooperative and create a platform that would make it even easier and quicker to share and collaborate. So AP StoryShare is in fact built for speed. Editors told us they didn't have much time to take on new tasks. And frankly, when I first started interviewing editors, I was worried that many of them would take part. So we designed a platform that takes just minutes to use. Anyone can post a, once they have a password, a username and password, can post a story in less than a minute. It's plug in a headline, plug in a lead, cut and paste the story. You don't even have to upload from your computer system. You can grab it from your website. It's very quick. For those who want to take it another step further, there are many other features on this website that can be taken advantage. For instance, every story that's posted, there's a little chat board. If someone's looking at the story and sees a problem or an issue, they can weigh in. As AP moderators, we can also weigh in and point something out if we need to. It's important to note that AP StoryShare is an entirely volunteer army. As I said, news outlets get a username and password to gain access, but what they share and when they share it is up to them. We simply encourage news organizations to post stories that are of least regional, if not statewide interest, and most entries hit the mark. The goal, again, here being to create a large amount, steady amount of content that other newspapers can use in their publications or radio stations or TV stations. Key to the success of this venture so far has been it's not just a website. Though the AP doesn't edit copy on the platform, an AP staffer serves as a moderator, and that active involvement has contributed to its success. The moderator will make sure items are posted correctly. We also keep an eye out for copyright compliance. But more importantly, we really look to build good relationships with editors in each of our states so we know what their needs and challenges are. In New York now, where we've been doing it for 4 months, we've really developed a kind of esprit de corps, which is very encouraging, given that, as I mentioned early on, I was concerned people would cooperate and collaborate. Each day we send out emails to a number of editors in each state to tell them that we've seen a story that we think would be great for the site and could they post it, and practically universally they'll post the stories. In our surveys about 2 of the editors to see what they think about these emails, they consistently tell us that they actually enjoy getting the occasional nudge. At least that's what they tell us to our face. One of the lessons we've learned from this whole pilot so far is sharing is contagious, and that's probably not the best word to use. Before our New York launch, a number of editors expressed skepticism about sharing news with their competitors, but once they could see robust sharing by others, most climbed on board and became active contributors. I think it's important to note that this is not just about sharing finished content. We designed this new platform to make it easier for news organizations to pool their resources, and we're experimenting with various ways to do that. The tool allows members to solicit help from other news outlets or propose collaborations. When New York's governor gave his budget address, we put out a quick request for sidebars and got about a half a dozen sidebars examining various aspects of that spending plan. Even more notably, in Colorado, a coalition of journalists recently used AP StoryShare for a very ambitious day-in-the-life collaboration on the pandemic. Over 100 video clips, 58 stories, and dozens of photos were loaded onto the site. The feedback we got that it was very easy to load the material and very easy to take it down. The response we've gotten in New York State, again, where we've been doing this the longest, has been very gratifying. 2 editors, in fact, wrote columns talking about the new effort, explaining to their readers that they got to seeing a lot more content from news organizations around the state and that they, the readers, would benefit. And here's, I think, a pretty telling figure. Over 1,000 stories have been shared to date. What's ahead? Well, now we're nearing the 2nd phase of the project, continuing to make improvements. And now the big question is, how do we make this financially self-sustaining? Always a big question. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And Larry, there's a question for you in the Q&A from Carrie Mitchell, if you don't mind jumping in there and answering it. You kind of answered it, but.
Will do.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So next up is Jennifer Hemmingsen, the project manager for Seeking a Cure. Jennifer, I see you there. Turn your video on and unmute yourself. There you go. Hey.
Hello. All right. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for sticking around to the bitter end, and thanks for the Center for Cooperative Media for pulling this all together. It's really exciting to be here. It's a good time. So I'm Jennifer Hemmingsen, and I live in the Seattle area, but I'm a native town of like 650 people in the middle of south central Minnesota. So their closest county hospital was about 15 miles away. And in the mid-1990s, that Albert Lee Hospital merged with the Mayo Medical Center in Rochester. 2 decades later, Mayo executives decided to shut it down. That meant everybody who needed inpatient care would have to travel yet another 20 miles down the road to the next hospital, or even farther, to go ahead and get their care. So let me get my screen set up here. They weren't alone. According to researchers, 172 rural hospitals have been shuttered since January of 2005. 130 of those have been in the last decade. Even before COVID threw hospitals around the US into debt, rural hospitals were struggling to get by. That's because rural populations tend to be older and poorer than their urban and suburban neighbors. They suffer more from chronic health conditions. They're more likely to be covered by government health programs with reimbursed providers at much lower rates than private insurers. The problem is really bad in the South, but no rural area is immune from this. By one recent estimate, 18% of rural hospitals in Midwestern states were at high risk of closing unless their finances improved. It's an important story that impacts millions of people, but it was being neglected because it's happening in small towns covered by small news organizations with limited resources. So we figured that by working together, we could put those pieces together, reach a wider audience, and explain the bigger picture. I worked with Lyle Muller, who was then director of IowaWatch, and Sharon McGowan of the Institute for Nonprofit News' Amplify News Project. We put together a group of 12 partner news organizations in 7 states. And at first we limited project participation to INN members, but then we expanded it to include a number of external partners, who included local newspapers and public radio stations. We met every other week, then we met weekly to discuss the project's scope and timeline, share ideas and resources. We decided I would report the regional story, partners would report in their own coverage areas, and then I would fold in bits of their reporting in that central piece. We'd share content back and forth, and then we'd make it available for anyone to publish with attribution. During our check-ins, we shared our research and sometimes interview notes. We gave feedback on each other's stories, and we corrected our own courses so our reports weren't too redundant and they didn't stray too far afield. The result was a 5-part radio series and a collection of digital and print stories and photos that ended up being republished in 120 unique outlets across 32 states. The project drew attention of policymakers, politicians, and at least one presidential candidate. Without working together, none of us individually could have gotten anywhere that kind of reach. This was carried out by small shops, nearly all nonprofits working within existing resources. INN members received small stipends for participating. A grant from the Solutions Journalism Network helped offset travel and freelance costs, but it was incredibly lean. Now many of the original partners and some new ones are working on a second project with the support of the Center for Investigative Reporting and SJN. This one focuses specifically on rural healthcare and COVID. When people in my parents' hometown learned that they were losing their hospital, they were worried about their health care, but they felt disappointed and betrayed in a much bigger sense. That hospital is where their friends and families worked. It's where all the babies were born and all the loved ones went to get better, and it's sometimes where they had to say goodbye. It was a sign of the community's health and vitality. It was a point of community pride. What they didn't know was that they weren't alone, that all around the Midwest and around the country, rural communities are experiencing similar situations and similar grief. The Seeking a Cure collaboration helped tell that story in a way that would not otherwise have been possible. I think it's an awesome example of how we're stronger when we work together. So I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk a little bit about it. I'm happy to answer any kind of questions or hear your feedback. And I have an extra minute. Sorry.
Awesome. Yeah, you did so good. You're like 45 seconds under.
Boom.
Thank you, Jennifer. I mean, that's such an important project. Such an important project.
Yeah, it was a real joy. I was really excited. that we were able to pull it together. And I'm not joking, like the way that we were able to do it with such minimal resources was a true inspiration for me.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And that kind of goes to the point that some speakers made earlier too about sometimes you just have to get in and start doing the work. And that's, you know, how you can, yeah, build this stuff. So thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so next, to wrap up the 2020 Collaborative Journalism Summit, last but certainly not least, is Daniel Bates, who is representing a fantastic organization based in Germany, Hostwriter, and hostwriter.org. So Daniel, are you there? I see you, and you're unmuted?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted, yeah.
Awesome, good. The stage is yours, take it away.
Oh boy, let me start my timer. I'm gonna get the opera. I'm gonna get the. It's like the Oscars, you know. I thought you were gonna play music to get people
I know,
off the
right?
stage, you know. Let's see, share the screen. Okay, cool. All right, let's share this. Hang on a sec. Okay, cool. All right, yeah, I'm just gonna dive straight in because we don't have a lot of time. So yeah, Hostwriter. Hostwriter, if you haven't heard of it, it's hostwriter.org. Hang on a sec.
Yep, need you to click present first. It's not showing the presented slides. It's just showing the pre-presenting.
Oh, it's not showing the presented slides. Okay, present. Is it working now?
No, that'll do if we want to just go for time. That's fine. You can do it that way, but we can see your whole PowerPoint.
Oh, you can see the whole PowerPoint thing. I'll leave it like this because I'm going to skip around, you know, some web pages as well. So, yeah. So hostwriter.org. It's basically the mission is to create an open network that helps journalists collaborate across borders. The problem is if you're a younger or freelance journalist, you might not have the resources that larger newsrooms have. Obviously, if you have bureaus in different countries like the New York Times, then that's not a problem. Whereas if you're like me and you want to do a project across borders to address the issues like climate change or the coronavirus, you don't have those kind of resources. So Hostwriter brings people together and allows people who are independent or sort of starting out in their careers to do that. Our solution, it's a global network that was founded in August 2013. It's been online since May 2014. And those numbers there, 4,000 plus journalists in 136 different countries. I think those are a little bit on the low side. I think then we've increased. But the point is, it's a huge network. It's a very valuable resource. I personally have used it for many years to find collaborators, jobs, tips, many things. What do Hostwriters do? I will start with the one on the right, Couch. Hostwriter has been described as the couch surfing for journalists, which I think is a description of part of what it used to do and what it does. You know, if you're in a different country or a different city and you need somewhere to stay, then you know, it's a great resource for meeting with people and someone to put you up. But the main things that it does are advice and co-authorship. And I'm actually going to go onto the Hostwriter website here to show you. This is the main sort of message board where the sort of real work gets done. As you can hopefully see, there's a section for fellowships and grants where people can post things, find a job if there's a job posting, co-authors, pitches. You know, this is where you know, freelancers go to sort of collaborate, to pitch ideas, to sort of seek out people. And if you're freelance like me, this is incredibly useful and incredibly inspiring, you know, to come for ideas for things to do. You know, why do we do this? We do this for a number of reasons. I'm preaching to the choir here, but breaking out of the national echo chamber is important, as is shedding light on international trends. The big ones for me were, you know, through working through a Hostwriter, accessing new skills, languages, and thought processes. You know, being able to work with people who can think of things you aren't even thinking of yourself because they have a different perspective shows the strength of collaborating across borders and getting a diversity of perspectives. And for me, that's been a really rewarding and eye-opening sort of part of it. Also, on a practical level, applying for funding outside of your country is a great thing too. If you want to get something off the ground, you know, if you can't get the money in one country, if there's a link to another, that's another way of getting projects off the ground. Before I run out of time, because I've got a minute left, I'd like to show you two other ways that Hostwriter supports the freelance community and supports its Hostwriters. Each year, Hostwriter does the Pitch Prize and the Story Prize. The Story Prize is 2 prizes, one of €2,000 and one of €1,000 for stories which demonstrate cross-border collaboration, and they're judged by a host-writer panel. And then there's also the pitch prize, where 2 winners get €1,000 for a story which sounds promising, and the money is to help get it off the ground. There is also a book that we did last year called Unbiased the News, and this was a collection of essays by host writers about the need for diversity. Obviously, being a white man, it's kind of ironic I'm delivering this message, but I'm very pleased to say that I'm in the minority here. And these essays show that the diversity of opinion across borders and different backgrounds is what makes collaborative projects strong. So hostwriter.org is the website, and I think that's basically it. Yeah, 5 minutes. Thank you.
That was perfect timing, and I love that we could hear your iPhone go off in the background exactly at 5 minutes. Thank you so much, Daniel. Hostwriter is a fantastic platform and just such a good group of people. I mean, just good people all around the world, which I think just speaks so highly of what Tabia and everyone has built. So thank you for representing today.
Sure, thank you. Cool,
and so that is it, everyone. That's it. That's the 2020 Collaborative Journalism Summit. We did it. We did it. We did it online. We did the whole thing in place instead of in person. And I'm just so grateful to everyone for participating, for registering. We had 750 people register, as I said, around the world. I was trying to keep track and I couldn't, but here's my short list. The United States, the East Coast, the West Coast, the South, the Midwest, Germany, Egypt, Belgium, Brazil, Nigeria, Lebanon, Indonesia, Malaysia, Holland, Turkmenistan, China, Australia, Japan. We had folks around the globe. And I think that really speaks not only to the moment that we're in, but to how important collaboration is.